Hi, my name is Greg Coapstick. I'm a graduate student at South Dakota State University. I'm in my first year of the Nutrition and Exercise Sciences program, and I'm also in the Nutrition and Dietetic internship. So the end goal of the program is to be eligible to take the exam to become a registered dietitian. But for today, I want to discuss the study I was part of called Nutrition and Body Composition of Collegiate Wrestlers. I was a college wrestler myself, so this was a population I'm familiar with. And it's interesting because despite it being well documented that athletes have elevated nutritional needs, college athletes, really of various sports, have been reported to consume low quality diets. So in this case, that just means diets that have a low healthy eating index score, as well as underestimate their needs for energy, carbohydrates, and fats. But regardless of these findings, only the largest universities are going to have nutritional support or even education tailored to student athletes specifically. And then more specifically, wrestlers have the lowest score for diet quality, as well as some of the highest prevalence of extreme weight control behaviors when collegiate sports teams are compared to each other. Additionally, wrestlers have been found to have low intakes for vitamin D, iodine, biotin, and zinc. Nutrient intake is of particular concern for wrestling because it's a weight class sport. So many athletes are going to engage in rapid weight loss and longer term weight cutting techniques in order to make weight during the competition season. So these practices can put wrestlers at greater risk for nutrient deficiencies that could impact performance and even just overall health. But before any recommendations can be made, whether that be for weight cutting and performance or just optimal health, we need to monitor athletes' current intake and determine how consistent their intakes are. For these reasons, our purpose was to quantify macro and micronutrient intakes of male collegiate wrestlers and examine the reliability of intakes from two separate dietary records. So to do this, we had 10 male wrestlers complete two 3-day food records, each one being 4 to 7 days apart. And then we also measured height, weight, and skin fold thickness in order to gather body composition data so that we could estimate energy and macronutrient needs. So in table 1 here in the middle, you can see the means with standard deviations as well as the reliability variables for each of the nutrients we evaluated for both of the food records. So for micronutrients, we also calculated the percent of the RDA for the mean intake values. And as you can see, vitamin A, vitamin E, and potassium intakes did not meet the RDA for either record. Potassium is close on record too. However, I'd also like to point out that the RDAs are recommendations for the general population. And it's often speculated that athletes have higher micronutrient needs, but there's not many set recommendations. I think the research to establish those hard and fast numbers really just hasn't been done yet. One micronutrient to look at, though, is calcium. So the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the Dietitians of Canada, and the American College of Sports Medicine have claimed that 1,500 milligrams of daily calcium is probably necessary for athletes with low energy availability to optimize their bone health. So even though these athletes' calcium intake is above the RDA, considering their energy intake is low, which we'll get into here in a minute, they might still benefit from increasing dietary calcium. And then another micronutrient worth mentioning would be sodium. As you can see here at the bottom of table 1, the mean values are above the RDA, but considering that sodium is an important electrolyte, a higher intake is likely going to be necessary for athletes to replenish what's lost in sweat during training or competition. So although again, it's hard to say for sure without recommendations being set, and then the exact number is going to be different depending on the individual as well. So then table 2 shows the individual intakes for energy and macronutrients for each record. And then the highlighted rows are the recommended intakes for athletes. For carbohydrates, we used the recommendation of 6 grams per kilogram of body weight, which is right in the middle of the range it's recommended for sports similar to wrestling. For protein, we used 2 grams per kilogram. This is a pretty high protein intake, and we use this number because there's evidence that shows that an elevated protein intake can help to spare lean body mass even during a caloric deficit. And then lastly, a fat intake of 1 gram per kilogram should be adequate to supply athletes with enough essential fatty acids as well as just energy for day-to-day tasks. So if you look closely, you can see that most of our participants had overall energy intakes below their estimated energy expenditure, and carbohydrate intake similarly did not meet the recommendation of 6 grams per kilogram. Based on these numbers, these wrestlers are likely not replenishing their muscle glycogen stores, or at least not fully replenishing those stores. And this could certainly have an impact on performance, and then potentially just energy throughout the day. Their protein and fat intakes were more adequate, although only 4 participants met the protein recommendation of 2 grams per kilogram, which isn't particularly concerning for overall health, but it will be especially important for those that are consistently engaging in rapid weight loss for their performance. When looking at reliability, energy and macronutrient intakes values ranged from good to excellent, with acceptable coefficients of variation, suggesting that these intakes may stay stable at least during the preseason when these measurements were taken. This can be helpful for making recommendations, as it kind of gives us a good idea of what these athletes' current intakes are, or current habits. However, micronutrient intakes could have much more variability. So reliability values here had a wider gap, ranging from poor to excellent, with coefficients of variation ranging from poor to acceptable. And depending on what micronutrients are lacking, this could have many negative impacts on health, especially when athletes are energy deficient, as is often necessary to make weight for wrestling. And looking at the nutrients I mentioned earlier that are low in this population, so that would be the vitamin A, vitamin E, as well as potassium, some adverse effects they might see could be feelings of fatigue, which could be associated with really any macronutrient deficiency, possibly a reduced immune response due to low antioxidant intake, and then a low potassium status could lead to muscle cramps, especially during times of training or competition. So overall, we conclude that wrestlers are likely to benefit from nutritional education regarding ways to increase nutrient density even while being in an energy deficit. This could be beneficial for performance as well as just overall health and even quality of life, particularly during a competition season.